Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This episode continues to explore conventional and unconventional relationships, examining relationship anarchy with a new friend, Jessica Chamberlain, aka Juicy from Clubhouse, the new hot social media app that features real-time conversation. Quoting from an article by Katie Heaney at The Cut, relationship anarchy, a term coined by Andy Nordgren, is a relationship philosophy which draws its tenets from political anarchy, the main one being that all relationships, romantic or otherwise, shouldn't be bound by any rules not agreed on by the involved partners. What those relationships may look like may vary greatly from pair to pair, but there are several core values shared by most relationship anarchists, being non-hierarchical, i.e. they don't rank their romantic partner or partners as necessarily more important than their friends, anti-prescriptionists, i.e. there are no built-in prescriptions about what a partnership must look like, and often non-monogamous. Besides discussing the origins of the term relationship anarchy, Juicy and I discuss some of the misconceptions. For example, these ideas can apply to more than an intimate or romantic relationship. They can apply to friends and family, including adult-child relationships. Moreover, the deviations from the norms may be big, such as non-monogamy, or small, such as whether you vacation together or not. We conclude by discussing some tips for the aspiring relationship anarchist, keeping an open mind, valuing exploration, and having a process by which to process ideas and challenges, such as having a therapist. Note, this episode was taped live in a room on Clubhouse, and it was taped as part of a solo club that I started there. That club has thousands and thousands of members and is growing exponentially. As a result of the live taping, there may be some comments that are not relevant to the material on the podcast, yet you can just ignore those comments. One last thing, please rate and review Solo. Your reviews matter to getting the word out to your fellow singles living remarkable lives. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to a special live taping of Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Jessica Chamberlain, aka Juicy. Juicy was a farm kid, athlete, scholar, artist, and writer who became a sex worker to become a better person. Juicy, whose pronoun is they, but also likes he or she, now helps humans be more human and build regenerative organizations. Their main healing and capacity building tools are emotional transmutation, the desire diagram, and the rise and shine vision quest. Juicy is polyamorous, queer, and a lifelong practicing relationship anarchist. Welcome, Juicy.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I'm very excited to talk about this.
I can tell. We are taping this in a solo club room on Clubhouse, the new hot social media app that features real-time conversations. Besides hosting Solo, I've been building a community on this app, and the Solo Club, the club for singles on Clubhouse, already has over 13,000 members and followers. So I encourage anyone to consider joining. As you can see in the red dot in the title, we are taping this episode for my podcast by the same name. So this episode is a continuation of a series that I've been developing on conventional and unconventional relationships. And here we are to talk about the cutting edge approach to personal relationships called the relationship anarchy, which I learned from Juicy here on the app. So let's start a little bit with definitions and its origin. What is relationship anarchy? It's a provocative name.
So relationship anarchy was created by a woman named Andy Nordgren, and she coined it in 2006. And it's basically a premise that relationships don't need conventional containers or really preconceived containers to help relationships be fruitful. And so it really brings in this idea that relationships should be founded on an idea of equity, that we don't have to have all these strict rules on how relationships are supposed to be or how they're supposed to unfold, and that the idea of love isn't something that you can divide up into container, into a clear pie of like, I'm only allowed to love this person this way because this is the type of relationship it is, a friendship, or this is a romantic relationship and it has to go down this road. And so it's really the way that I personally look at it, it's that the values of the relationship and the relationship itself and what you're creating with that person in the world and between the two of you is what determines the container for the relationship. And that relationships throughout our lifetime take different shapes and different forms. And so the idea is to allow the relationship to unfold in an organic way that's appropriate for the two people or several people that are involved in it.
Okay. I'm already a little confused. So I want to ask some clarifying questions about it. So first of all, this is a fairly new concept, at least the term relationship anarchy. My guess is that relationship anarchy was happening during Woodstock in some way, shape, or form, at the very least.
It's probably been happening for a lot longer than that.
Yeah, to the ancient Greeks, and so on. Okay, so this is really fundamentally, if I understand you correctly, about norms.
Exactly.
Between two people or more than two people, society, and this is something that we've been unpacking with this series more generally, is there's a set of commonly accepted norms and rules about how relationships work. Some courting process, maybe some casualness, some defining the relationship, some special status because two people are together, they're an item, they're a couple, they're a partnership, they're a marriage, whatever that is. And what I understand, in much the way that anarchy seeks to strip away rules, so does relationship anarchy.
Right.
Yes?
That's exactly right. Yes. Yep.
So what might be a rule that gets stripped away? Right. So if I understand correctly, like you are creating your own set of conventions, as you say, a container, and you're not using someone else's container.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And so the rules that can be stripped away are in terms of like how much time you spend with the person, how much time you're supposed to spend with the person, how long, what the duration of the relationship looks like if it moves from being a romantic relationship and it moves into a friendship. It doesn't mean that the relationship is lost or gone, that it just changes shape, that the needs of the relationship have evolved. And so there are all kinds of conventional rules, and you don't really understand how many rules govern how relationships should and shouldn't unfold until you actually start bringing in a really deeply embedded understanding of equity in your relationships. And so the way that I like to look at it is that I'm my own independent entity, and then the person I'm in a relationship with is in their own independent entity, and the relationship is its own independent entity. And so it's about a conversation and communication about what I would like to experience in the relationship, what I would like to offer in the relationship, and then what I would like to, have the other person experience, or what do they want to experience. And so you're actually crafting and weaving this relationship together based on your shared values and your shared evolution. And so it's allowing that relationship to cultivate an intimacy and a journey together. And there may be all kinds of different ways that relationship changes shape, and rules that you didn't realize you were unconsciously following that actually weren't appropriate for what was best for you and the other person and the relationship itself.
Yes. Okay. So I think these are pretty profound ideas, and in part because I think the average person never even considers these rules. These rules aren't written down. Oftentimes they're unwritten, but yet they're pervasive. They're commonly accepted. So one of those rules might be monogamy, right? So it's commonly accepted that, let's say, a partnership between two people that's riding, to use this term by Amy Guerin, a previous guest, riding the relationship escalator, that these two people are intimate only with each other. And most people just accept that that's the way the norm is. Obviously, you're seeing these norms change over time. And so what you're saying is that a relationship anarchist or two relationship anarchists would have a discussion about, will this be a monogamous relationship or not?
Yeah, well, it's the reason why I didn't bring up monogamy as a rule or as a non-rule, because it's not so much about the rule of what the relationship is supposed to look like, or non-monogamy versus polyamory. It's more about like, what are your values and what do you want to experience in the relationship? And so it's focused on a much more broader topic rather than just focusing on like, are we monogamous? Are we in an open relationship? What does this look like? It's more about like, what's your values? What do you want to create as a human being? What do you want to experience? And how can that relationship further that? And one of those things that determines the container could be monogamy, or it could not be. It could be swinging. It could be a whole bunch of different things, right? So like, I'm in an anchored relationship with my partner, and he doesn't actually have any partners at the moment, right? Whereas I have partners where I see them like once every couple of years, and we go to a swinging party together, and that's our relationship, right? And so it's just really about like, all of us have so many different facets as human beings, and those facets of ourselves, they intersect with our values, and our values are expressed through these different facets of what we're passionate about or what matters to us, right? And so like, I'm a very sensual and very caring person. And I also, I really love to be in a relationship occasionally where I'm very dominant. I really enjoy having someone that's submissive to me. And so my anchored partner has absolutely zero interest in that. And he loves the fact that I love that. And I'm working on cultivating a relationship with somebody where that person is what I like to teasingly call my human footstool, because I want that, because that makes me happy. And that's fulfilling for me in other ways. So it's really about like each relationship, but I don't actually see the quality of my relationship with my romantic partners any differently than I see with my friendships with friends. And so I'm about bringing the values of what matter to me to those relationships, whether it's romantic or not. To me, like the experience of intimacy isn't that much different. I mean, the intimate relationships with friends that are not sexual or romantic, there's still so much deep intimacy there. I just don't have sex with them. And so, and that's okay. And that's perfect. That's perfect. That's what that relationship is asking for and what that relationship needs.
Yeah, I didn't mean to derail this with the M word, with the 800-pound gorilla of relationships. I was trying to use this as an example. So one clarifying point is that relationship anarchy is about relationships. It's not just about romantic and intimate relationships, right? So it can be applied to friendships, familial relationships, and so on. And so obviously monogamy may or may not be at play depending on that. But there are a set of rules. So you had mentioned something about like how often you would see each other, whether you would live together, I'm guessing is one of those things. Again, where typically within a romantic relationship, it's expected that at some point you merge your lives, you come together, you share space, you share a bank account, and so on. And what an anarchist says is, well, hold on a second. Let's make sure that that's something that both of us would want.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I have versions of that with my anchored partner. We're in a domestic partnership. I'm 45 years old. We met when I was 40, and I kind of wanted something that was a little bit more conventional, someone that I could like bring home to see my family and, do birthday parties and stuff. And I just for a long time had kind of resigned myself that I maybe couldn't find that person, and that was okay, and then I'd happen to find that person, and we have shared bank accounts, and we also have separate homes. So we're generally together, usually a couple of weeks a month when we have the opportunity to be together, because we actually live on opposite coasts. So my main home is in Hudson Valley. His is in downtown San Jose, where I am now. And we were separated during COVID for 273 days because we were quarantined on the opposite side of the country. And it actually was really remarkable how much our relationship grew and became so much more intimate and so much more close with the shared experience of being apart from one another. And when we finally got back together on December 2nd, it was like all that time apart just melted away. It was like we were never actually apart. And so it's been really beautiful. And I think that, knowing the relationship, knowing that framework together actually makes it easier. And it's not really a framework. It's about just like, what do we want to experience together and what do we want to create because we love each other?
Okay, so let's talk through a few other examples of this. And then what we're going to do is talk about some misconceptions. We're going to talk about some best practices, and then we'll open things up for a conversation. Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about monogamy, maybe about a living situation, merging one's finances. What are some other dimensions or some other sort of assumptions about how a friendship or romantic partnership would normally work that might be subject to this, for lack of a better term, negotiation or conversation?
So are you talking about like what you want me to give you a friendship example? I didn't quite understand the question.
Well, I think it'll help the listener. This is a very bold idea. It has a scary term associated with it, anarchy. It's not something that I think the average person, even someone who might have some experience with unconventional relationships, might even be aware of. And so let's give a few more examples of some of the ways that two or more people might come together and deviate from those norms. What might that look like? It could be a friendship or otherwise.
Do you want me to give you some personal examples? Because that's the only kind of way I can articulate it, I think, well. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So I have this partner who I've known, we've been together for about 10 years, and he really likes to be in Las Vegas. And we met when I was in Las Vegas. I was dancing there, and we had so much fun together. We would play craps and go to the spa and pick up women together. And it was really like some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. And then whenever I go to Vegas, we hang out and we have fun together. And sometimes when we're there, I'll meet him at the craps table and we'll play craps. And then the girlfriend that he's like seeing that day will come over and hang out with us, and they'll go off and have fun together. And then I've actually been in Vegas twice with two of my other partners at different times. And each of those partners have met that partner. And so so it's really just, I can tell it's awkward for people to a certain extent, but I don't personally experience this as threatening. When I first learned the term relationship anarchy, my anchored partner and I went to a talk together about it, and it was just so natural. And I was like, this is the way that I've been living my whole life. And so that's an example of a romantic thing where it's because I'm comfortable with the relationships, I'm comfortable with the evolution of each relationship, that the people that are around me become comfortable because I'm comfortable with it. And with friendships, it's just really about like, when I talk about what's the need of the relationship, with my friends, I just really like feel the relationship. I know it's going to sound like I feel the relationship in my heart, and I think about that person, and I feel them in my heart, and I listen to what my heart is telling me what I need to do in this relationship. Do I need to call them? Do I need to send them a letter? Whether it's my niece or my nephew, or it's my father, or it's a friend, it's really about like listening to the relationship and holding it in a place where I really feel like that I want a great outcome, where I want to be around that person and I want them to feel joy when they're around me and I want to feel joy when they're around them. And so it's that cultivation of intimacy, that cultivation of trust, that cultivation of transparency and honesty that happens no matter whether it's a romantic relationship or not. The throwing out the rules makes it a lot easier for me to listen to the relationship because the rules aren't distracting me from what the relationship should or shouldn't be.
Yeah, so you can approach it value-free without guilt. You can diverge without feeling deviant. I think this is a powerful idea, and I'm just trying to be a bridge between someone who's super comfortable with it and someone who clicked on this room or listened to this podcast because they're like, this sounds fun. And so now, to what degree, however, is that something with your Vegas partner that you have had a conversation and you say, listen, we may not see each other very much, but when I come to Vegas, I'd like to see you in this kind of way. Is that okay with you?
Well, I think that because our relationship was centered on all of that fun to begin with, I mean, we've known each other for over 10 years, so it's gotten wobbly in parts and places at the beginning, and it's just slowly gotten more comfortable over time. So there was a point in the relationship where he was like, I don't want you to see other people. I want you to just see me. I want it to look like this, and I want it to look like this. And I was much younger and I really didn't have as much comfort with who I am as a person. So I went along with it and then realized that it was just not who I was. It was never going to work for me. And I started seeing my other partners again, and that created some conflict in the relationship. And then over time, it just evolved and we came to a place of understanding and care for each other. And now it's in a really comfortable, fluid place where we just have fun together and enjoy each other and just let it flow from there.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing this. And then with these other friends who might be along for the ride, so to speak, rolling dice and so on, how much are they sort of figuring this stuff out? Or do you say, hey, listen, we're going to go hang out with this person. This is the type of relationship we have. What I'm trying to understand is how much of this is about communication and how much of it is about feeling and comfort and acceptance.
I think that when I'm doing the feeling into the relationship and feeling what the relationship needs, it's about working to establish trust with that person. And so then once you have trust with the person you're in a relationship with, then you can develop that trust you can carry over to the other relationship. So it's kind of like how if you're networking with somebody and somebody says, hey, I know a really good lawyer for you. That's a much better referral than like getting a referral from, just Googling it online, right? And so once you establish a really good trust and really good communication with that one person, then it's easier to carry it over to the next person because there's already a through line of trust established, right? And so, but it's an evolution. Like I'm in love with somebody that I've been in love with for a really long time, for probably about 6 or 7 years right now. And he's very uncomfortable with all of this. It drives him absolutely batty. I don't go looking for romantic partners in the conventional places of like polyamory or any other places that you might think that I just date in the real world, in the wild, so to speak. And then I tell people who I am. And like my anchored partner, he was married for 20 years before we met. And we met on Bumble. And he saw my profile and he was like, that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. And it's just been so comfortable and we're so happy with it. And this is what he's kind of wanted his whole life and didn't realize he wanted. And so, with my partner that's really uncomfortable with it, it's just an evolution of just talking to him on the phone and telling him how much I love him and wanting him to be happy. And I've had plenty of relationships where, someone I'm dating romantically who I really, really like ends up getting a monogamous relationship for a while. And that person goes away, really goes away. Sometimes the person that they're in a relationship with is like, you can't speak to that person anymore. You can't have anything to do with them. I've even had one of those people like stalk me online. And so it's not easy, but the care and the love that I have for that person is never going to go away. It's never going to stop just because they're in that situation. And if their relationship works out and they spend the rest of their lives together in whatever relationship they feel is best for them, then I fully support that. I mean, that gets into the concept of compersion, which is when you love somebody, you want them to be happy. And what it is that truly makes them happy, you feel experience of love and acceptance and joy because they're happy, even if that happiness isn't necessarily like in your direct sphere of influence. And so, I had someone that I dated in New York City for quite a few years, moved to Chicago, got in a really serious relationship, and then came out of that serious relationship and was like, hey, how are you? What's going on? And we got to meet up when I came west on the train and we're starting to talk again. And I have no idea what that form of that relationship is going to take. I have no idea what my intention or desire is in for it right now. But I'm just happy to have them back in my life because I miss them and they meant a lot to me. They mean a lot to me.
I really like this idea of compersion. It's had a profound effect on me as I think about friendships, this idea of anti-jealousy. And in many ways, that notion of anti-jealousy or compersion is a perfect example, which is that the norm is to be jealous, right? The norm is to be threatened by outside forces, that we are, in the case of a dyad, it's the two of us, this team that has special status, and that someone may come along and threaten that emotional bond, that connection. And so I like the fact that whether it be in the poly community or beyond, this idea that you will be excited and happy when someone meets someone that delights them or they have a great night of sex or something like that. So that's my observation. The second one is you had mentioned dating apps and Bumble. Do you on the app signal this early, like as part of your bio, or is this something that comes up and unfolds as you get to know someone, conversation, call, meeting, date, etc.?
Yeah, it's pretty much out there. It's okay. My Bumble profile is very clear. Like, this is who I am, period. And I just really, make that really clear. My only complaint about Bumble is that when you're dating, and my friends and I have talked about this, is that there's no way to set your settings for both men and for women. Once you choose one, you have to choose one or the other. And it drives me crazy. And actually what I found is that as long as you don't ever select men or women, then it just stays open. And so I've been really lucky that I never set it to one specific type of gender. So it's a little bit limiting in that way. But yes, they may have changed it. This was something I observed like 6 months ago when we were talking about it.
Yeah, that's a good pro tip, Juicy.
Yeah.
Now what I'd like to do is talk about some of the misconceptions associated with it. Juicy, what are some of the misconceptions associated with the relationship anarchy?
I think the biggest misconception is that it doesn't involve commitment. I think that, actually, when I first learned of this term and went to a talk about it, that was my main perception, even me coming to it as a polyamorous person, really understanding, once I understood the term and understood that this is what I've always practiced without realizing it, is that commitment is actually part of it. It's a huge part of it. And the idea is that you're committed to the evolution of the person, you're committed to the evolution of the relationship. And what you're not committed to is a specific outcome, right? You're not committed to what the relationship should or shouldn't be. You're committed to the person and you're committed to the relationship and you're committed to yourself in relationship to the relationship. So the commitment to yourself is like, is this relationship working for me or not? Is this a relationship that helps my life improve? Do I feel good? It's like what I tell people, especially when I'm coaching people through relationship stuff, whether they're looking for open relationships and they're poly or they're looking for a monogamous partner, is it's your 50% of the relationship that matters. How do you feel in the relationship? How do you want to feel in the relationship? How does the person make you feel? How do you want to feel when you're with this person? How do you feel about them? Really? And what do you think about them? How do you perceive them? How do you want to experience it? And so that's the commitment. So the commitment to yourself is if this relationship isn't working for you, then it either needs to change, to create a different framework for it, whatever that framework is. And it also needs to, evolve, and maybe it needs to end. I mean, I've very rarely ever cut anyone out of my life. And I've pretty much cut somebody out of my life last year. And that, for me to get to the point where I just really don't want someone in my life, means that relationship is just really not something that feels good for me. The commitment is even deeper in a way, in my perception, not to create a value on it, but it's the commitment to my values and the shared values that I have with this person. That's what I'm committed to when I talk about the evolution of the relationship and the evolution of myself and the evolution of that person. And some of the people that I keep in my life, I'm committed to having them in my life, maybe because they didn't work out as being an anchored partner or anybody I wanted to live with. But I enjoy spending time with them once a year or even once every couple of years, because as I change and as I grow, I have a mirror of somebody that knows me when I was a certain way a few years ago. And I like to see how I show up with this person. Okay, I've evolved and I've changed. How is this person seeing me now? How do I feel when I'm around them? Do I feel like I'm more myself? Do I feel more comfortable? How did their blind spots and their issues affect me? Am I able to see them more fully and more completely? And so I love being able to have these. I mean, I have relationships now that are romantic that have evolved, that are going on 20 years because of not having to have these strict container. And I'm so grateful for them, because they remind me, if I get a little bit down on myself or I lose some trust with myself, they remind me of how far I've come. They remind me that the person they see me now is the person they always knew I could actually be. And so there's so much value in that, of the commitment just doesn't have a strict container, and the commitment evolves over time as me and the other person evolves.
So I think we've already stumbled earlier on one of the misconceptions, if I may, and that is actually two, I think. One is, this is not just about intimate relationships. This also has to do with friendships and family. That's the first one. And then the second one is that this is not necessarily that you're trying to create something that might be seen as really unconventional, like a polyamorous relationship or a swinging partnership or something like that. It may actually be as something, and I don't want to use the word mundane, but something as simple as two childhood friends who recognize that we may not actually speak all that often, but once a year we get together for this weekend and go and do this fun thing. And just because we don't speak for the other 363 days a year doesn't diminish us in any way. That could be an anarchist approach.
Absolutely. That's actually a really, really good example. And I actually think, from some of the research that I've done on this, and this is often a complaint, and often a question I get when I talk to people, is that it's about the time commitment. So people really, like, when they, online, when there's articles about relationship anarchy, people are like, who has the time? How do you have the time? People see it as something that's very self-involved, very indulgent, like just looking for attention. And that actually, when we're looking at the underpinnings of thinking about relationship anarchy from a perspective of like really making equity real, like really treating relationships on an equal level. Not that the relationships are the same, that each one is unique. And so we live in a world right now that makes us have to just go and go and go and go. And all of our relationships tend to suffer, right? It's so hard for us to take time. And so, yeah, it is a lot of time. It does take a lot of commitment. It does take long conversations on the phone, or, for me, in my case, like flying to see partners or taking the train to see partners, because I love taking the train, just to spend birthday weekends with them and things like that. And for me, the outcome of that is so much more expansive than the time that I've committed. So much more, because if I have a relationship with someone, I share a particular facet of myself more strongly than another partner, or perfect example, my sister knows I collect this type of canning jar that I'm very passionate about. And she found one for me. She found 2 of them for me at the discount store she goes to. And it's like that thing that I share with my sister, I don't really share with as many other people or with friends and things like that. And so you get to be like surprised and delighted by that. And then that surprise and that delight means that when I come to other relationships, I'm more full. I'm more fully myself. And then I have more of myself available to be my full self in the facets that I share with that partner. And so that's what I'm talking about, my personal evolution and the evolution of the relationships, is that by not compartmentalizing it so strongly, it actually creates more time for me, right? Because that means that maybe that partner can like do things for me that will make other parts of my life easier. So it actually creates time for me.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, especially with a kind of traditional marriage or partnership, which is designed to crowd out almost everything else personally by virtue of the underlying assumptions about it. That person is the one, and you're supposed to vacation with them. You're supposed to live with them. You're supposed to go to weddings together, and so on and so forth. So I can see how deviations might actually free up that time. What are some of the other misconceptions people have about relationship anarchy?
Yeah, that biggest thing, and this is tied to the piece about commitment, is that we don't care, that we're just in it for ourselves, that it's some kind of like, this is the self-indulgent piece, right? Or that we're looking for attention.
Dare I say selfish? This is a word that comes up a lot, that it's a selfish approach to relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually find it to be quite selfless quite often, that there's just a really like deep respect and an honoring of whatever that person needs to experience, what's best for them. Like one of my most important partners in my life, who really in many ways saved my life, and I'm able to do everything I do in my business because of this relationship, just most remarkable person, moved overseas in 2017. And it was heartbreaking for me, and really having to it was all of this yes and, right? So it was like, yes, it was absolutely the right thing for him to move. I'm proud of him that he moved. It was the most amazing decision, and it hurt me and it broke my heart, and I'm going to be okay, missing them. And really understanding that all of those things are going to happen in the relationship. And that's just where the relationship needed to head, and seeing the value in not seeing them once every 2 weeks like we used to it's helped me grow and become strong as a person. And then I know one day, whenever it suits, we'll get to see each other and spend some time together again. And that'll be a great celebration, and even a celebration of the time we spent apart.
Yeah. So, okay. So if I may just recap a few of these misconceptions as you take a moment to think of if there's any other big ones. So one is, I really like this idea that it is actually about commitment, right? About commitment to the person, to the self, and to the relationship. Although you do give away the commitment to a particular outcome, there's more flexibility there. I like the idea, of course, that this is not just about intimate relationships and sex. This can have to do with friendships in the most pure sense of the word, that the changes in the container, to use the original language, may be big or small, right? It could be tiny little tweaks, or it could be profound changes in which you create a relationship that is unique in the way that the word unique should be used, which is a one-of-a-kind relationship. There is no other relationship like that on the planet. And I like the idea that in many ways, this is not a selfish approach, but rather a selfless approach, because what you might do is have to compromise what you want for the betterment of the relationship and the betterment of that person.
Yeah, I would actually say that it actually does away with idea of compromise to a point, because when you really get into the like emotional and the nitty gritty of the relationship, you actually find that there's a way that the relationship actually blossoms that's beyond a compromise.
Creation is co-creation. Almost.
Yes, exactly. So like with my partner that moved away, like that was so hard. And I know it was the right thing. It was the right thing for both of us. It was the right thing for him. It was the right thing for me, even though it hurt. And so it does away. This is why it's so much ultimately about equity, because it does away with all the zero sum thinking about what a relationship should or shouldn't be. And then it's just so much easier to understand. Even as you're working through the emotions or the desires or the wants that you have, it's about like, and I made it really clear with him. I said, look, you can do whatever you want in the relationship. You cannot speak to me again. If that's what you really want, that's okay with me. And here's what I want. Here's what I desire. And over 20 years, that's been a constant evolution of our relationship. And that's okay. That relationship has taught me so much about how to just really learn what the nature of unconditional love actually is, while also not sacrificing standards or advocating for a more committed trust, so to speak.
Juicy, I really appreciate you not only sharing this knowledge, which I think for some people is kind of mind-blowing to redefine an approach to relationships through this lens, but also sharing your own personal stories, which are really compelling. So last thing I wanted to ask you, Juicy, is suppose someone is moved by this idea, wants to experiment with it, wants to try it, wants to learn more about it. What are the kind of best practices for a relationship anarchist?
I think the biggest, most important tool is to have some kind of grounded, embodied healing practice of some sort or another. Because once you get into the shedding of the rules or the shedding of your preconceptions about how a relationship shouldn't or shouldn't evolve, whether it's no matter what the relationship is, it can get really messy, because we are so entrained by society, not just when it comes to relationships, but what our feelings are supposed to do, that when we feel sad or we feel afraid, then we have all these feelings on top of what it is we have. And the tool you mentioned when you're introducing me, emotional transmutation, is a tool that I created that came out of my experience as a sex worker, that came out of how do I navigate all of this, and navigate who I know I naturally am, which just happens to have a label of relationship anarchy that fits. Like, that tool has been so foundational for me at being able to unconditionally feel my feelings and then know my own knowing of what it is that I need to ask for, advocate for, or communicate in the relationship. And so some kind of practice like that to help shed and transform. And when I say transmutation, I mean what needs to go in the transmutation process that our bodies already naturally know how to do, like it knows how to take our food and turn it into, minerals and vitamins and, to sustain ourselves. It's the same thing with transmutation. Is what needs to go will go, what needs to stay will stay, and often solidifies, and what needs to change will change. And that's what helps us that kind of practice helps us come really in tune with what our real values are. Like my one value that I have that runs across all of my relationships is I need people to work on themselves. I need people to give themselves permission to be more fully expressed, to be more true to their truth, whether that means they never want to have had anything to do with me or not. I don't care. Whatever that is for them and whatever that looks like. And so it's really about making sure you have a practice, and then really making sure that you are able to know what your actual values are. What is the most important thing for you in relationships, both in terms of what you want to give and what you want to experience. And then that becomes like a compass, an internal compass, when you almost like a tuning fork, where you develop a resonance. When you really understand your values, it develops a resonance where you can go into a relationship and get a sense like, oh, there's a deep resonance. I feel connected to this person. I really feel like I want to share a relationship with this person and really grow with this person. And then from there, you can allow the relationship to move more organically. and move in a way that feels appropriate for you and for the relationship and that person. So identifying your values and what really matters to you and having a practice so that when you are activated, listen, I've had partners really, really very much upset me. I was dating someone I really loved who I didn't spend a lot of time with. Just we had a great connection. We traveled together. And we had a conversation last year in 2019. And I said, I really would like to spend more time with you. I'd like to see how we could work this relationship out and have it be more, just have more companionship. And he decided that he wanted a monogamous relationship with one of his other partners. And I found out on Facebook. And I was really hurt. And I said, because he said, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to go away and come back. And then he just got in this relationship. And then so I called him in the fall of last year and I said, look, I messaged him and said, I really like to talk on the phone. And I said, look, I really care about you. You really matter to me. And it really would have been nice if you just called me up and said, I just really want you to know that I'm going to be establishing this relationship with this person. And it was one of the most powerful experiences I had. And I had to, because he said he was really gracious. He was really grateful. He apologized because he that I mattered to him. And that's not how he likes to be in relationships. And it took me months from when I found out he was in a monogamous relationship to really work through my own stuff around deserving and love, to have the courage to call him up and have that conversation. And that was great. Having him affirm me in that way and having the courage to say something was really powerful and very healing for me. And so that's what I mean, really knowing your values and having some kind of practice, whether it's working with a therapist you can really trust. There are more and more therapists that support polyamory and relationship anarchy. There's an organization in New York called Curious Foxes that I think is really great. They held the relationship anarchy talk that I went to that I thought was really, really powerful. And then, also, if you're really interested in exploring this, it is called relationship anarchy, but I don't know. I let go of even that label, I see it as like a doorway that I've walked through and I'm like, yes, makes me feel comfortable because I have something to describe it with, but really, really understanding what you want to experience in relationships, how you want to be in relationships, and taking the time to really unearth what that is for you.
Okay, so to work through your values, and I think that should be obvious, right? Because if you're not going to use society values, you should be using your own. And then, because you're going to be bumping up against social norms, and because that person that you are coordinating with may have a different set of values, that can cause conflict, challenges, and so on. And so having a practice to be able to work through what might be difficult. Then the last thing is that there are some resources out there in the world, including this Curious Foxes. And then what are some of the other sort of best practices that as someone is are there sort of smaller things? Like suppose someone wants to dip their toe into being a relationship anarchist, how they might go about doing that.
That's actually, this just came to me. What I would recommend, and I've actually been experiencing this a lot with some of my friendships, is I actually experimented with this with someone I met on Clubhouse at the beginning of the year, actually in the past month, and identify a friendship that someone you really trust, someone that you really just really care for and cares for you. And I would instead of setting intention of and this is actually a really good COVID experiment. So, because we can't really go anywhere, or do anything the way we would want to, can't go to parties or whatever the way that we did. And so what I would do is talk to that person, have a conversation, and set an intention of something you would like to create together, or an experiment that you would like to unearth together, whether it's reading a book together or it's discovering something about yourself together. And so what's very interesting is this person and I decided, when I'm setting intentions, I like to choose a word or a phrase that we talked about this, Peter, earlier last year. What I'd like to do with intentions is that I come up with a word or a phrase that kind of encapsulates what it is that I'm trying to create. And then let that lead the way of the unfolding, right? And so I would choose a relationship that was somebody you really trust, and choose an intention of what you're weaving and creating together, and see what comes out of it. And so what was really interesting is this person and I, we chose relationship. But what was very interesting is that she would fall to wanting to define it as relationships. And I would want to use relationship, which is more meta, whereas relationships, you're getting more into the nitty gritty of the relationship. And so what we did is an interesting experiment is we flip-flopped. So I did relationships, which is what she would normally do. And then she did relationship, which is what I would normally do. And then we set that as an intention for our spiritual work, for our evolution as people. And it really set the tone where now I'm having this beautiful experience with a lot of my friends where we're evolving together, where the thing that she is working on is helping me and the thing that I'm working on is helping her. And so there's this weaving together of this tapestry where each person is being more of what I call like their perfect puzzle piece. Right. And we're evolving together and helping each other like sharpen and hone and become more aware. And so choose a relationship you want to experiment with a little bit like that and see where it evolves. And it could be as simple as reading a book together or having an author you work together. So like what you experience in clubhouse rooms, but just in a microcosm between you and somebody you really care about. It could be a sibling, it could be a parent, and just seeing what evolves out of the relationship rather than like, this is the outcome that I want to have with my father. This is the outcome that I want to have with my partner.
Yeah, there's a term in statistics about what's called degrees of freedom. And so what relationship anarchy does is it allows you more degrees of freedom rather than these sort of predetermined paths. So is there one last tip that comes to mind before we move on to question and answers with the audience?
The last thing is you don't have to proclaim this out loud, right? You don't have to you can come out as if you feel like this way of living suits you. And it's also just something that you can carry quietly, just carry it quietly from a place of curiosity. I mean, actually, really all it comes down to is, I say this all the time, is as best you can, because it's hard, staying suspended in a state of curiosity, right? And being curious about yourself, being curious about the person, being curious about the relationship, and then allowing the curiosity to lead the way. That's why I offered that little exercise about setting the intention and seeing how you evolve, because it invites in this experience of curiosity, invites in experience of flow and creating something greater than the relationship itself, right? And so that curiosity piece is really important. And like I said, just carry it quietly, just experiment with it. And experiment with what it would be like in a relationship to let go of a preconception of how you think it should or shouldn't evolve and see what comes out on the other side. It doesn't have to be high stakes. It doesn't have to be a big, giant proclamation.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm just going to recap these sort of 3 best practices. One is to do some work and understand your values. The other one is to have a practice. By the way, I think whether you're a relationship anarchist or not, you should have a practice in which you can work through difficult times, conflict, uncertainty, challenges, whether that be a meditation practice, a journaling practice, a therapist, or any number of things. And then the last one is sort of a constellation of behaviors and perspectives, which is you can start small, to keep an open mind, to approach it with, I like this idea, to be suspended in a state of curiosity. I think that's a big, big idea.
As best you can.
As best you can, right? Right. People want certainty. Uncertainty can be really aversive, but it can also be a powerful tool, it sounds like. First of all, I want to say thank you, Juicy, for this information. I really appreciate the time that you've given. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.